From the headquarters of Tell Us Your English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. Ecuadorian President Lenin Moreno has announced the extension of the state of emergency in parts of Esmeraldas on the border with Colombia. The state of emergency was declared in January after a car bomb attack. The extension follows the kidnapping and murder of 3 journalists from the El Comercio newspaper and a couple on the border. Earlier, the Ecuadorian government announced that President Lenin Moreno has accepted the resignations of Interior Minister Cesar Navas and the Minister of Defense, Patricio Zambrano. The president had given Navas and Zambrano 10 days to capture the leader of the armed group, Olivier Sinisterra, known as Huacho, responsible for the kidnapping and killing of 2 journalists and their driver, and for later abducting another couple. The replacements for the 2 ministers will be announced in the coming days. Still in Ecuador, the Attorney General Carlos Baca has been removed from his position. He was the lead prosecutor of corruption investigations in the country. 128 out of 131 assembly members voted against him. The move came after Baca disclosed a private conversation between the former comptroller Carlos Potlit, who fled to the United States after being accused of corruption, and the former head of the National Assembly, Jose Serrano. During the conversation, Potlit and Serrano discussed plans to remove Baca. Baca, who was in office for 11 months, was also a key player in the detention of then Vice President Jorge Glass over corruption allegations. And with 128 votes and 3 abstentions, the National Assembly had censured and dismissed Ecuador's Attorney General Carlos Baca Mancheno. Our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera, reports.
The National Assembly dismissed the Attorney General of the state, Carlos Baca Mancheno, for breach of functions, as established in the Constitution. The lawmakers accused Baca of placing his personal interest before his duty as the first authority of the prosecutor office.
These actions taken by the Assembly are historic. I want to highlight the commitment of the Assembly members who voted in favor of the report made from the Audit Commission.
The impeachment session lasted around 10 hours and began with a reading of the report of the Commission of Political Control. Immediately, Baca Mancheno exercised his right to defense, arguing before the plenary against the accusations against him.
The
prosecutor called a political trial for a press conference. That's it. But when he's asked to present proof, he is lying.
Baca released an audio recording of a conversation between the ex-president of the Assembly and the ex-controlled fugitive from justice, which is one of the main accusations against him. However, the new Attorney General, Rea, has assumed the position of Attorney General of the state until the Council for Citizen Participation and Social Control appoint the new Attorney General. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Quito, Ecuador.
The North Korean leader Kim Jongun has returned home after his historic meeting with President Moon Jae-in of South Korea. Images of the 2 leaders raising a toast has resonated around the world. The meeting ended with a banquet, complete with a cake showing a united Korean peninsula and a musical performance. Earlier in the day, Kim and Moon signed a joint statement to denuclearize the Korean peninsula and bring a formal peace to their people 65 years after the end of the Korean War. It is the first time any North Korean leader has crossed into the territory of the South. Both leaders have been very enthusiastic about their meeting, with Kim calling it a new era of peace and Moon saying this summit would be a gift to the world.
If the people of the North and South can freely come and go along the path that I traveled today, and if Panmunjom, the symbol of heart-wrenching division, where we are standing now, becomes a symbol of peace, the North and South that have one blood, one language, one history and one culture will return to becoming one, and people of all generations will enjoy prosperity.
News of the historic talks have been welcomed around the world. People from both North and South Korea showed their excitement at seeing the two countries' top leaders beginning talks. At a local station in Seoul, commuters gathered around a screen showing the summit and applauded as the leaders shook hands. At the Imjangak, a park which is home to many statues and monuments regarding the Korean War, residents watched live coverage and waved the Korean unification flags. In Pyongyang, locals were optimistic about the talks.
I read the news that top leader Kim Jongun went to the southern area for the summit. I hope the summit, which is held again after a lapse of more than 10 years, could achieve fruitful results.
And world leaders from across the globe have welcomed the summit. China has applauded the Korean leaders and wished them positive results for the meeting. The Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chung-ying made the remarks at a daily press briefing.
We welcome the historic step taken by the Korean leaders. I appreciate their political resolve and courage. China truly hopes that the historic summit will achieve positive results. China has a poem saying, "Through every disaster the brotherhood has remained. With a smile at meeting, hostility is banished." We hope and expect the historic summit at the border village of Panmunjom will start a new journey towards lasting peace and stability of the peninsula.
And Russia's foreign ministry said it was keen to help cooperation between North and South Korea, including the development of joint infrastructure.
We offer our positive assessment of the agreement, listed in the declaration and signed as a result of the Inter-Korean Summit. We are ready to facilitate practical cooperation between the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the Republic of Korea, including the development of trilateral cooperation in railway transport, gas, electricity, and in other fields.
And U.S. President Donald Trump says he intends to meet North Korean leader Kim Jongun soon in an effort to denuclearize the region and hope for a day when North and South Korea could live together in peace.
I want to express my hope that all of the people of Korea, North Korea and South, can someday live in harmony, prosperity, and peace. And it looks like it could happen. When I began, people were saying that was an impossibility. They said there were two alternatives. Let them have what they have or go to war. And now we have a much better alternative than anybody thought even possible. I'll be meeting with Kim Jong-un in the coming weeks as we seek to denuclearize the North Korean area and the entire Korean peninsula. Hopefully the day will come when Olympic athletes can compete on a Korean peninsula that is free of nuclear weapons and where all Koreans can live together and can share their dreams. Be a wonderful thing to do.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe welcomed the dialogue as a positive step towards denuclearization and the solving of other issues.
I would like to welcome the sincere discussion between President Moon Jae-in and State Affairs Commission Chairman Kim Jongun on matters including the denuclearization of North Korea as a positive move towards a comprehensive resolution of various issues regarding North Korea.
And the Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arias has sent congratulations on behalf of President Maduro to the leaders of North and South Korea after the historic summit. Arias tweeted, "A dialogue without external interference guarantees peace." Now we're going to head into a short break, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
We have suffered an imposed heritage of exclusion and frustration for generations. Our future is doubly bleak as we face the unabated racism and deepened deprivation reserved for Black Americans. commonly depicted today as dangerous, carrying firebombs in their hands and hatred in their hearts. Who noticed before the fact that their hands were idle, their pockets empty, their hopes frustrated, and their hearts broken by indifference and contempt? Everyone is aware that a relatively few young Negroes have resorted to violence. But how many know that the unemployment rate for Negro youth in major urban centers has soared between 35 and 50%. They live in squalor in slums. They are cheated in education. They cannot hope for normal married lives. And they can expect more disease and earlier death than their white counterparts. To be a Negro in the United States is to be the victim of a system of deprival in a context of personal humiliation.
Welcome back. In Venezuela, President Maduro addressed a large rally as part of his presidential campaign. During the event in the city of Mérida, Maduro called on the Venezuelan people to vote as an act of sovereignty. Maduro highlighted the achievements made by his government despite the economic blockade and warned about the relationship between opposition candidate Henry Falcon and the International Monetary Fund.
The Venezuelan people are the ones who will choose the president of Venezuela, and we will do it by exercising our political sovereignty and our national will. I promised the Venezuelan people 2 million homes, and I fulfilled that promise. With our 2019 to 2025 national plan, we will reach our goal of 5 million homes. Do you know what project Henry Faltrump has? He wants to broker an agreement with the International Monetary Fund and fire 1 million public workers. Is that what Venezuela needs?
And in Barbados, in preparation for Election Day, May 24th, the General Secretary and Campaign Manager of the opposition Barbados Labour Party, Dr. Jerome Walcott, set out the party's plan to get into government with a list of promises for the electorate. Chief among them are the promise to fix the sewage outflows in the tourist-rich South Coast, to increase public servant salaries, and reintroduce the government payment of tuition fees for Barbadians attending the University of the West Indies.
The hopes of countless young Barbadians have been shattered. The inability to pay tuition fees has deprived them of the opportunity to get a university education. This great act of betrayal by the Dems came after the Prime Minister said making Barbadians pay to attend UE would be a retrograde step. A BLP administration will reintroduce free university education for all students at UE.
In the wake of the Windrush scandal, British journalist Afua Hirsch is in Trinidad for the Bocas Literary Festival. She's been discussing identity and citizenship in the United States and the challenges she has faced as a mixed-race woman, having to prove that she was, in fact, English. She says growing up in the United Kingdom meant constantly being asked, "Where are you from?"
But the cumulative effect on a young person growing up in Britain who is British of being asked constantly where you're from is that you think, oh, well, there must be an answer, you know, because if I were British people wouldn't keep asking me. And in my case, I decided that the answer was Ghana because my mother's family came to Britain from Ghana. And my father is white British with some Jewish German heritage. But it was my Ghanaian heritage that made me visibly different, which was the reason I was getting asked this question.
The commander of the U.S. Southern Command, Kurt Tidd, and Trinidad and Tobago's Minister of National Security, Edmund Dillon, officially brought the military training exercise Operation Fuse Response to a close on Thursday. The exercise ran from April 16 to 27th. Fuse Response is run every year in different Caribbean and Latin American countries. It is the first time it's been held in Trinidad and Tobago. Officials from both sides called the exercise a success, which focused on the U.S. government training national security agencies for emergencies, man-made and natural.
The exercise presented a unique opportunity to test and operationalize government's holistic approach to crisis management, as opposed to testing individual arms of defense and protective services. Through the exercises, law enforcement, military, and non-military participants gained a better understanding of the process to be activated in a crisis situation.
It is also an example of the long-standing bilateral defense relationship between our countries, which supports our common interests and addresses challenges of mutual concern. Chief among those challenges are threat networks that span the globe, undermining citizen security, threatening communities, eroding the rule of law, and placing unforeseeable financial burdens on our countries.
We go now to Mexico, where family members of the 43 students who disappeared in Ayotzinapa are calling for the safe return of the students 4 years after they went missing. The protests come at a delicate time for Mexico. Mexican society is already shocked by the recent disappearance and murder of 3 film students in the state of Jalisco. The parents of the missing Ayotzinapa students are asking the government to keep the case open.
We are certain we are going to get to the truth, because there is no scientific evidence that shows our children are dead. We know the police want to close the case, according to the information published by the newspaper Reforma, in which they accuse the Chicago gang. This is the truth they're trying to make us believe, but we don't buy it.
In Peru, the former president, Ollanta Humala, and his wife, Noreen Heredia, are waiting final papers to secure their release. The couple were under a preventative detention for more than 9 months. If the papers don't come in time, they may have to spend the weekend in prison.
Crowds waited outside the Chorrillos Penitentiary for hours for a glimpse of the former president leaving prison. The Constitutional Court revoked the preventive imprisonment ordered by a judge. On the grounds, there are no indications that they plan to evade justice.
The Constitutional Court is guarantor of fundamental rights, and according to the International Court of Human Rights and other international institutions, it must guarantee the right of freedom and, among others, the presumption of innocence.
Debe garantizar el derecho a la libertad personal.
Many political figures reacted to the judge's decision, such as President Martín Vizcarra.
That's a decision of the Constitutional Court, and as a member of the executive power, we have to be respectful of the independence of powers.
The former President Humala and his wife are charged with money laundering accusations, as they had allegedly received $3 million for his electoral campaign by the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht, money from illegal activities that are investigated by Peruvian authorities.
In Nicaragua, university students have accepted the invitation of the Catholic Church to participate in the peace dialogue called by the government of Daniel Ortega. Students are asking for the violence to stop and for security for all. They held a vigil in the capital city of Managua in memory of those who died during the protests. Meanwhile, the country's vice president is ready to have the country return to a state of normalcy.
It is time to build peace through dialogue so we can continue all together to fight against poverty, to fight for welfare and happiness for all Nicaraguans.
We're going to take another short break, but join us again after another look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
You cannot have a drone without cobalt. You cannot have your planes without cobalt. If there is a shortage of cobalt, We can't wage a war. I have a very tiny country called Belgium, but I need a land that has so much resources. With that land, they were exporting rubber, they were exporting elephant tusks, specific ivory. We had about 10 million Congolese dying. It was modern-day slavery. Within a few weeks of him being in power, he was deposed. Within months, he was assassinated by the CIA on January 17th, 1961. He was a democratically elected leader of a country, assassinated simply because he wanted the resources of his country to benefit his people.
Welcome back. Thousands of Malawians have taken place in a nationwide anti-government protest with peaceful demonstrations held in 6 cities. The protests, organized by civil action groups, are against alleged corruption and poor governance under President Peter Mutharika, who has ruled the country since 2014. At the July 2011 anti-government protests, police opened fire, killing 20 unarmed civilians in scenes that shocked the world. The Great March of Return in Palestine has entered its 5th week. Here's more on that and other stories making headlines around the world.
At least 50 Palestinians have been wounded on Friday by Israeli forces at the Gaza-Israel border, despite a top UN official urged Israel to refrain from using excessive force against them. The Great March of Return protest has now entered its 5th week. Thousands of peaceful Palestinian demonstrators have gathered asking to break border blockade and return to their ancient land. At least 41 people, including 2 journalists, have been killed since the protests began. The leaders of the world's 2 most populous countries, China and India, are meeting in the central Chinese city of Wuhan for a 2-day informal summit. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has met with Chinese President Xi Jinping among rising tension over border dispute and rivalry of influence in the region. Both leaders will be discussing the developments in the India-China relations from a strategic and long-term point of view. In a wave of walkout protests by teachers in the US over wages and funding, tens of thousands of teachers in Denver, Colorado have marched in the streets on Thursday. Teachers have been protesting since February in different parts of the US. They claim that schools are underfunded by nearly $800 million, which affects not only their salaries but also the quality of the education.
The number of gay and transgender refugees in Spain has increased dramatically over the last years. LGBTQ organizations say many are refugees from Latin America and North Africa, and they can continue to face discrimination in their new home.
Harvey and Jefferson are a young Nicaraguan couple who arrived in Spain 5 months ago. They explain their personal reasons for leaving their country.
I
didn't feel safe. I felt my life was at risk, that at any moment I would be killed whenever I left my home. People knew where we were, they knew what we did, and they actually harmed us whenever they could.
Spain is one of the most legally and socially tolerant countries for the LGBTQ community. In 2009, the country opened its doors to these kinds of refugees, prompting many people to move there.
I will say that around 20 or 25% of refugees are linked to LGBTQ issues. There are a lot of people who take 4 to 6 months asking for protection, and many of them don't realize they can seek asylum for this reason.
According to the CEAR, the majority of LGBTQ refugees that arrive in Spain come from Latin America and Africa. Now, they choose Spain for the protection offered and also because of the common language. Today, there are 72 countries around the world that legally punish LGBTQ people. In 8 of those, people can even get the death penalty.
The very police here works to crack down on people who want to harm gay people, lesbians, and the trans community.
In spite of the big legal and social comfort they find in Spain, things are still not perfect.
The help offered here is still not enough. We hear of dramatic situations of people who are desperate for a place to live and are not helped. That's not how a human being should be treated.
Harvey and Jefferson have suffered discrimination in different places in Spain. Nonetheless, they say that they feel at home in Madrid. They will look to make a new life here.
We've come to the end of this news brief, but for these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at tellusyourtv.net/English. And you can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Soini Gray. Thank you so much for watching.
Telesur brings you special interviews with social and political